Last Breath is a good movie, worth seeing in theaters, but it's a falsely advertised movie too. It follows the true story of a deep-sea diving crew doing everything in their power to rescue Chris Lemons, played by Finn Cole, who in 2012 got lost 330 feet under the sea with no heat, no light, and only 15 minutes worth of oxygen. Something I didn't know going in that I actually thought was kind of neat is director Alex Parkinson actually co-directed the documentary this movie's based on, which would explain how he did such a good job at recreating the living and working conditions these divers experience on a regular basis. There are entire scenes of the divers going through step-by-step protocols to show how much preparation they have to train for, which makes the build-up to the emergency all the more shocking. The camera work features POV shots of compression tanks, body cams, drones, sometimes filmed with a different aspect ratio or camera quality to feel the tight claustrophobic space, while also making the more agoraphobic underwater atmosphere so tense to see on the big screen, with lots of wide shots of open, vast, yet murky, dark, unclear space where danger can pop out or you could get lost at the turn of a dime. This is the rare case where dim lighting actually makes it more suspenseful, and color choices like bright red flares or yellow searchlights add so much intensity to watching these divers shrouded in shadow and silhouettes, especially with the sound design of them floating underwater, breathing through their umbilical cords, even the sounds of waves crashing upon their ship, and Paul Leonard Morgan's booming musical score that races against time. Meanwhile, the divers can only swim so fast, making us anticipate dread even sooner. And the best part is, the underwater stunt work is done as practically as possible. I'm not sure how much CGI was used or certain spots where they could have hidden it. The exterior of the ship as it's being hit by a storm definitely was CGI, but even then, there are establishing shots at the beginning of the film that show a real ship to make the digital effect look better later on. Everything felt tangible, and even though tons of scenes require stunt doubles to do great work, there are key dramatic moments where you can visibly see that it's the actors doing their own stunts, and whatever training these guys had to go through, that's some real dedication. The only complaint I really have in regards to filmmaking is that during the initial disappearance and later on in the rescue mission, they cut away to different angles of the same event too often, and I think had they gone the extra mile of filming in longer takes, kind of like Gravity, not exactly the same, and for all I know, maybe that wasn't feasible budget-wise, but had they held on certain shots for longer periods of time, I would have felt the intensity and emotional impact a lot more, because in my opinion, we needed to see them struggle a lot more to get emotionally invested. Now, in terms of characterization, Last Breath is the kind of true story movie where the script is so simplistic, characters are written in a way where you're supposed to put yourself in their positions rather than get actual character depth. That's the actors who make them interesting and likable. It kind of reminded me of the Peter Berg, Mark Wahlberg trilogy of true story thrillers, where it's a Hollywood-sized movie in terms of scope and stakes, but the dialogue and character interactions are much more realistic that it felt refreshing. Even though the filmmaking overall is what keeps you invested in him, Finn Cole has the naive, innocent charm that you expect the rookie of the team to have, where he's eager for a challenge but somewhat nervous of taking on the responsibility. There's actually a lot more screen time of him struggling to survive on his own than I thought there'd be that could basically make up its own section of the film. I do like the script's not afraid to point out he made a couple mistakes that cost him, while still noting he's truly capable of surviving on his own. Especially this great moment of him trying to climb a narrow tower while keeping his flare, the one thing that can help him see, in hand. There's a romantic subplot between him and his fiancée that was as generic as it gets, but thankfully, Cole has enough chemistry with Bobby Rainsbury to make it count in the few scenes they share together, and Rainsbury herself has a good monologue about being the typical girlfriend who's supportive of her fiancé yet scared shitless. And it felt genuine because she never went loud or over the top. If anything, she hates how nonchalant and accustomed she's gotten to how dangerous her fiancé's job is. But my favorite performance in this was actually Mark Bonnar as the chief of the diving crew, because he starts off having such a laid-back sense of humor. If you step out of the decompression tanks, your blood, your organs, everything will start to internally boil, and quite literally, you will all explode. Thank you for choosing this occupation, and have a blessed evening. Clearly trusts everyone's judgment and gets along with them nicely, but when shit goes down, his loyalty towards them shows in every decision he makes to make sure no one dies. There's a great scene where he discovers a drone could either help or make things worse in the situation, and the controller he's arguing with is visibly shaken at the risk of failure, but everyone knows that if they don't try, they'll regret it instantly later. And even though I knew this wasn't going to work, there was genuine suspense in not knowing how it was going to fail, and the actual reveal was genuinely bittersweet and poignant. Cliff Curtis as the ship's captain was just there. He didn't do a bad job. They tried giving him dramatic moments of not wanting to risk an entire crew's safety for one person, even though we all know they're going to do that anyways, or have this deep camaraderie with his second mate, but it didn't amount to much. Honestly, there was a crew member in 2 or 3 scenes tops played by Josef Altin who had more emotional moments with far less screen time or character depth, but the urgency of his job and his fast-paced performance emphasized the race against time and how crucial his role is to the mission. Now, you may have noticed by now I haven't mentioned Woody Harrelson or Simu Liu yet, and there's a reason for that. The trailers and poster will make you think that they're major stars in this movie and super crucial to the mission, which they are during the last half hour. After losing their friend a third of the way in, they're barely in this movie. In fact, it wasn't until halfway through looking at the oxygen timeline that I'm sitting there going, gee, these guys better hurry their asses up. Wait a minute, where the fuck have you guys been? And in all fairness, without spoiling anything, they're so closed off from the ship's crew and the man they're trying to save that had they been in other scenes, it probably would have just been them going, we're gonna rescue him. I know. Over and over again, so I guess it's a good thing they didn't repeat that scenario, and you can honestly make the argument that casting A-list actors and Simu Liu in these small roles makes their limited screen time more emotionally impactful when they arrive to rescue their friend, which works well enough in the end to say that it was worth it, but I still felt ripped off. Harrelson's casting in particular, in my opinion, was a huge publicity stunt, because even though, I should make this clear, he gives the best performance out of anyone in this movie. And it's not that he does nothing. He has skills and motivational moments that are super crucial to this kid's survival, but his role is nowhere near as physical as you would expect the mentor of the group, the top-billed actor in this movie, to be. Without spoiling anything, the one time you actually see him diving underwater is a flashback, and his face is hidden in a way where it was clearly a double doing the heavy lifting for him. Beyond that, Harrelson does nothing physical in this. He never goes underwater, which... talk about misleading the audience with the trailers. And as for Simu Liu, he's the typical stoic, no-nonsense grouch who never shows compassion unless he absolutely has to. Oh, and that's his character in the movie too. Honestly, judging him as an actor, he always seems to shine in more physical roles, and when he has to do the underwater stunt work, he really sells the responsibility of having to rescue himself and someone else simultaneously. And despite years of training, is still human and vulnerable enough to the point where he has to be humbled and reminded of his training midway through in order to survive. It's a simple role, but he does a good job with it either way. I can't believe I had this much to say about Last Breath because the script and characterization is so simplistic. It's really more about the cinematic experience of this real-life event through the cinematography, musical score, sound design, and of course, committed performances from a great cast, which is why, in spite of every cliched moment that you've seen in every other true story thriller, it's totally worth the watch. If there's a theater nearby you playing it, definitely check it out. And with that, guys, thanks as always for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Last Breath. Be sure to like, subscribe, check me out on Patreon and buy me a coffee, and I'll see you all in the next review. Take care.